At the closing of the 19th century, the United States suddenly became a colonial power. Victorious in the Spanish-American War, the United States annexed the Philippines among its colonial possessions. Guided by the rhetoric of manifest destiny, the American military forces rebuilt the war-torn archipelago and sought to reshape the city of Manila after an imperial image of a well-ordered, healthful, and beautiful tropical city. With the advent of civil rule, the American regime deployed its resources to build public architecture and sanitary facilities that signify the American democratic and civilizing mission. The early years of American occupation was beleaguered by a succession of epidemic diseases attributed to unhygienic domestic practices of the natives. The use of the toilet was introduced in 1902 among dwellers of the Bahay Kubo in Manila through the Pale Conservancy System, or Cubeta. In the absence of a metropolitan sewer, the system provided each household with wooden buckets, which were collected daily by the municipal excrement wagons. Public toilets were built in congested NEPA districts. The authorities banned the use of esteros for bathing and washing and established a new type of communal architecture that combined the functions of toilet, bath, and laundry, supplied continuously with clean water. The first public bath and laundry, a one-story structure made of concrete, was built in 1913. In 1908, the Americans introduced the neighborhood concept known as sanitary barrios, which permitted NEPA houses to be built on blocks of subdivided lots with a built-in system of surface drainage, public latrine, public bathhouses and laundry, and public water hydrants to be availed by the residents free of charge. Imprints of these barrios can still be seen in Sampaloc, San Lazaro, and Vito Cruz. With the success of the sanitary barrios, the American authorities focused their efforts to modernize the Filipino house. The colonial architects and sanitary engineers successfully evolved a new kind of domestic architecture. Known as tsalet, which was a single-story structure constructed either entirely of wood or a combination ferroconcrete and wood. The living areas were maintained at an elevation a meter above ground, lower than the Bahay Kubo, to discourage the placement of domestic animals in the underfloor area. The extended porch or veranda in front, which could be accessed by either an L-shape or a T-shaped stair, was another improvement. Unlike the Bahay Kubo, the interior space was defined by wall partitions which divided it into rooms. In 1912, the Bureau of Health drew up the schemes for sanitary urban house. Single detached, semi-detached, row house apartments, and one-story concrete chalet. After the Great Fire of Manila in 1903, the experiment on materials yielded the ideal sanitary house of 1917. A refinement of the Tsalet, this modular prototype house introduced a fire-resistive roofing material composed of diamond-shaped shingles molded from concrete mixture and rice husk and reinforced by woven bamboo. Its modular components, cement floor and wall slabs, were implanted with sawali or woven bamboo. Meanwhile, as the sanitary transformation was in high gear, insular architect Edgar K. Byrne, chief of the Bureau of Architecture, designed set pieces that mimicked the styles of Spanish colonial buildings, the Spanish Mission Revival, which served as a transitional style. The Government Laboratory, Municipal Building of Manila, the Insular Ice Plant and Cold Storage, Government Printing Office, and Customs House exhibited the penchant for pseudo-Spanish imagery. Byrne's Insular Ice Plant and Cold Storage, built on the southern side of the Pasig River, was the first large building to be erected by the Americans. Its massive brick masonry was fashioned in the revivalist style, with low-relief false arches, pedimented portal, and a series of mirador towers. Byrne modeled Manila's first city hall from Bahay na Bato, but with an all-wood construction using Oregon pine executed in American clapboarding technique. His government laboratory, a cement and lime mortared structure, was dominated by a central portal defined by a scalloped parapet. Its height was achieved by two mirador towers flanking the entrance. The cast ornaments of mudéjar pattern were made of forms carved on site. Byrne also designed the cottages and other buildings in the hill station of Baguio. One of the priorities of the colonial administrators was the development of a master plan for the Manila and the hill station in Baguio. Their aim was to install a sense of cosmopolitan arrangement to Manila's chaotic patchwork of communities and create an upland health resort in Baguio. The designer of choice was Frederick Law Olmsted, Jr., America's famous landscape architect. At the last minute, he backed out due to scheduling problems. And an equally famous architect, Daniel H. Burnham, was chosen. Burnham's work for the 1893 Columbian World Exposition earned him a reputation as the father of the City Beautiful movement. Carefully designed vistas, Grand Civic Center, axial and radial boulevards, classicist formality and green open spaces and parkways were hallmarks of the City Beautiful. Burnham came to the Philippines with Pierce Anderson in 1904 and surveyed Manila and Baguio. Burnham admired the architecture of the Bahay na Bato and the colonial churches and suggested that they be models for Manila's future development. After 6 weeks, Burnham returned to America and completed the sweeping master plans for the two cities. The master plans aimed to reconfigure Manila and Baguio as a testimony to American imperial presence and technological modernity. For Manila, Burnham recommended detailed procedures for an imperial placemaking, the development of the waterfront and the location of parks, playfields, and parkways, the establishment of a street system which would connect every part of the city, the zoning of building sites for various functions, the development of waterways or esteros for transportation, the provision of summer resorts within an accessible distance from the city. It had a central civic core. Radials emanating from this core were laid over a gridiron pattern, and large parks were interconnected by parkways. The centerpiece of the Burnham Plan was the civic core with a grand concourse from the bay to an arc further inland. Here Burnham envisioned a national capital complex where colonnaded buildings were formally arranged around a rectangular plaza. Burnham provided a perspective rendering of the future buildings, a domed classical structure resembling the American Capitol. Radiating from this civic core was a series of tree-lined boulevards that divided the city into 5 sections and produced a street system that directed traffic efficiently. Burnham's Baguio plan was dominated by an elliptical space approximately 1 mile in length and 3/4 of a mile in width. Along the perimeter of the ellipse, Burnham sited a commercial district and a government center and a broad residential zone. The central portion of the area was reserved for a public park. Overlaid on this elliptical core was a street system that conformed to the contours of the hilly terrain. For the implementation of his urban directives, Burnham recommended Beaux Arts-trained William Parsons. Under his tenure, Parsons was responsible for the design of all the public buildings and parks for the entire colony. Under the guidance of the master plan, neoclassical forms slowly rose in the landscape. The plan also stimulated the adoption of Beaux Arts as the official style of the colony for the next 3 decades. Neoclassical Capitol buildings, the embodiment of the American Republican ideals, rose in every provincial urban center. Parsons followed Burnham's advice to learn from the extant Philippine Spanish sources and consciously orchestrated the fusion of locally derived architectural forms and neoclassical idiom to dramatize the encounter and coexistence of 2 cultures. Pragmatically, Parsons recognized the supremacy of large windows shaded from the harsh tropical sun and excessive glare either by metal canopies or by arches and colonnades. His plans called for open spatial arrangements that permitted maximum cross-ventilation. One obvious result of the fusion of vernacular architecture and neoclassic rendering was the use of translucent capice shells instead of glass for window panels. Perhaps the most pervasive legacy of Parsons, which lent to mass reproduction, was the model schoolhouses he designed for the Bureau of Public Instruction. He came up with 15 prototypes for a variety of site conditions and adopted ferroconcrete with a vernacular style. Materials, forms, windows, doors, and even blackboards were standardized to bring down costs and maximize construction efficiency. Most of the schoolhouses were 1 story high, elevated several feet above ground by square reinforced concrete piers. Capiz windows were reinvented as pivoted window rotating about a horizontal axis. Parsons situated the Capitol and municipal complexes in a park-like setting. His neoclassic designs for the capitals became the archetype for all succeeding capitals built before and after the war. Like the schoolhouses, plans of municipal buildings of later years were also standardized, and the municipal buildings of Davao, Boac in Marinduque, and Lopez in Quezon were built using the same standard plan. Plans of sanitary markets and tiendas were likewise standardized beginning in 1912. Parsons recommended concrete floors and steel trussed roofs in all of his 4 market prototypes and 2 standard tiendas. In these plans, Parsons provided for maximum light and air and placed them, whenever possible, near an estero or river bank to encourage waterborne commerce. Parsons' contribution to local architecture was the improvement of the quality of construction materials and techniques, such as reinforced concrete, concrete hollow blocks, and the can truss system. Aside from Parsons, there were other American architects like George Van Hagen and Ralph Doane at BPW, who contributed in the propagation of neoclassicism both in government and private practice. Van Hagen is best remembered for designing the unbuilt Capitol building in Manila, a structure meant as the centerpiece for Burnham's Capitol Center at Luneta. He also designed one of the first multi-story concrete buildings in the Philippines, the Masonic Temple in the Renaissance style. Doane, on the other hand, drafted the plans for the Pangasinan Provincial Capital, the Malacanang Executive Building, and the preliminary plans for the Legislative Building. The influx of American capital and assimilation of new culture allowed new building types to flourish. Social clubs had large verandas or loggias, swimming pools, or courtyards. Tennis courts, fine dining and grill rooms, bars and members' lounges. The first modern church in reinforced concrete was the Episcopal Cathedral of St. Mary and St. John, built in 1905. Done in the Mission Revival style, the cathedral had a cruciform plan with minimal decorations. A steel truss dome covered with copper and capiz windows. Multi-story structures during this period did not exceed more than 30 meters. In the absence of air conditioning technology, high ceilings, courtyards, large windows, and arcaded ground floors were the norms in such building types. In 1913, Manila's first reinforced concrete multi-story structure, Needler Building, was completed. New technologies like telephones, lifts, and plumbing were first integrated in the Manila Hotel in 1912. Tall corporate buildings like the neoclassic El Hogar Filipino, Pacific Commercial Company, Filipinas Insurance Company, French Renaissance Luneta Hotel, and the Art Nouveau Mariano Uy Chaco building altered Manila's skyline in the 1910s and the early 1920s. Deserving Filipinos who aspired to be architects were given scholarships by the government under the pensionado system beginning in 1903. The majority of pensionado architects received their academic training from the East Coast, the bastion of Beaux Arts pedagogy. Their homecoming propelled the establishment of architectural schools where they were recruited as faculty and consultants. Their influence, both in education and practice, signaled the remarkable surge in the number of structures in the neoclassical style. When Parsons left the Bureau, the pensionados gradually took over its key positions as the government launched its Philippinization policy. This batch of architects, together with a maestro de obras like Arcadio Arellano and Tomas Argüelles, earned a place in Philippine architecture as the first-generation architects. Some of them ventured in other styles, such as Art Nouveau, Neo-Castilian, and a variety of historical revivalism. Arcadio Arellano was the first Filipino to be employed by the Americans as one of their architectural advisors. His works contained Renaissance features, Gota de Leche building, touches of neo-Gothic style, Hidalgo House, classical elements, Mausoleum of the Veterans of the Revolution, and Art Nouveau decorative motifs, Ariston Bautista Lin House. Antonio Toledo was a master of the neoclassicist style who designed the grand edifices like the twin Corinthian buildings in Agrifina Circle, Leyte Capital, Cebu Capital, Manila City Hall, and Manila Customs House. Tomas Mapua was the first registered architect in the Philippines and established the Mapua Institute of Technology, the first architectural school in 1925. The PGH Nurses' Home, De La Salle College, and Centro Escolar University building were examples of his revivalist bent. Juan Arellano was the most prolific in the group. Arellano's mastery of neoclassicism assumed international stature when he received world acclaim in a competition held in New York for his his design of the Bank of the Philippine Islands. Through his monumental works, such as the Legislative Building, the Jones Bridge, and the Post Office, the American colonial presence was palpable. He also designed notable structures, such as the Chamber of Commerce building, Villamor, and the Benitez and Malcolm Halls of the University of the Philippines. Though he excelled in the classical style, Arellano shifted to Art Deco in his design of the Metropolitan Theater. Here he employed local details, such as bamboo banister railings, carved banana and mango relief, and batik mosaic patterns. Arellano's romantic nativist stance was further exemplified by his proposals for government buildings in Banaue, Ifugao, and Glan, Cotabato. By the late 1920s and 1930s, the dominance of neoclassicism was challenged by the second generation of Filipino architects who returned from overseas studies and European trips. The leading protagonists in this generation were Andres Luna de San Pedro, Fernando Ocampo, Pablo Antonio, and Juan F. Nakpil. They introduced innovative ideas and novel ways of utilizing non-classical ornaments and steered Philippine architecture to a new direction, the Art Deco. Art Deco originated in the 1925 Exposition Internationale des Arts Décoratifs et Industriels Modernes held in Paris. The buildings of the Art Deco were given to profuse abstraction and stylization, rich ornamentation, colorist effects, dramatic massing in simplified geometric forms, as well as exotic imagery derived from non-Western sources. The later manifestation of Art Deco, the streamlined Deco, evoked the imagery of machine and mass production. Rounded corners or semicircular bays, mechanistically smooth building skin, punctured porthole windows, tubular steel railings, and projecting thin roof slabs recalled the yachts and ocean liners of the period. Art Deco's exuberant exoticism and ornamentation were deployed in the facades of Elpo Building, Bautista Nakpil Pylon, Metropolitan Theater, Santos House, and Mapua House. While the stripped classicism of Bulacan capital, Cebu capital, and the Sariaya Municipal Building demonstrated the transition from classical to Art Deco. The stepped or zigzag silhouette of Art Deco was best captured by the insular life building, Bawan Municipal Building, and the pylons of the Quezon Bridge. The streamlined and maritime imagery were admirably applied to the Rizal Memorial Stadium. Hayalay Building, Marsman Building, Lopez House, and Far Eastern University main building. The craze for Art Deco coincided with the establishment of movie-going as a national pastime. Art Deco provided a fascinating escape, which common Filipinos found in the architecture of cinema palaces for a mere price of a ticket. Islamic and Mudehar Art Deco features appeared in theaters such as Lyric Theater and Bellevue Theater. Cafe Theater included Chinese elements in its Art Deco facade. Times Theater and Pines Theater was streamlined Art Deco. Luna de San Pedro initially worked in the revivalist styles like that of the French Renaissance-inspired Legarda Elementary School and Neo-Castilian residences, Perkins and Zobel House. He switched to Art Deco in his Perez Samanillo building, using vertical pipe moldings, canted arches, octagonal tableau precast, low-relief medallions. Luna's most celebrated work, the Crystal Arcade, featured continuous bands of concrete and glass planes sweeping boldly inward at the central mall. It was the first structure to introduce a mall-type commercial space. The Central Seminary building of USD and Paterno building were specimens of Fernando Ocampo's Art Deco manipulation. Pablo Antonio's architectural achievements were Manila Polo Club, the Ideal Theater, the residence of Ramon Roses, and early buildings of Far Eastern University. Finally, Nakpil, both an engineer and architect, designed and built the most number of large structures among the group. Nakpil's exemplary works during the pre-war period include Jeronimo Reyes Building, the World Eucharistic Monument of 1937, Quezon Institute Administration Building and Pavilions, and the Manila Jockey Club. In 1934, the United States Congress mandated the establishment of Philippine independence within 12 years. The Commonwealth of the Philippines was established in 1935 as transition government with Manuel L. Quezon as president. Quezon contemplated to build a new city and national capital for the new Commonwealth, reminiscent of Washington, D.C. But the Pacific War would temporarily frustrate Quezon's urban vision. On December 1941, Manila was declared an open city to spare the city from damage that might be caused by the advancing Japanese Imperial Army. The political instability and economic difficulties spurred by the 3-year Japanese occupation was detrimental to architectural production. What happened was a takeover of private and public buildings for military and political purposes. Part of the American military logistics during the war campaign in the Philippines was the prefabricated Quonset hut, made of galvanized corrugated steel sheeting over a frame of lightweight steel ribs. In February 1945, the Americans were set to reclaim Manila. The last days of war witnessed the wholesale destruction of Manila's built heritage and the irreplaceable treasures of colonial architecture. Paradoxically, American bombs turned Manila into the second most devastated Allied city in the world. What had been built in almost half a century to cultivate the American imperial imagination was reduced to rubble in a matter of days. As Filipinos moved on to post-war reconstruction, they would be gripped by nostalgia for a nation. A sense of mourning for the things lost during the war. It was a time to rise from the ashes and build a new nation.